Welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you enjoy these quiet expeditions, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight, you are walking the Dead Sea shoreline before dawn, headlamp low, and pace slower than pride. This is the lowest exposed land on Earth, and it feels like standing in a drained basin with the lid left on. Your beach is not sand, it is a crust of halite and gypsum plates that crunch, then ring hollow. You keep close to the waterline because the ground inland can look solid right up until it is not. Salt gathers on your boots in a white armor, and every step starts to weigh a little more. In the dry air, your throat tastes metallic, and the brine beside you shines like something you should not trust. You are here to reach a freshwater seep and mark new collapses, but the same seep is dissolving buried salt from below. So how do you cross a shoreline where groundwater dissolution creates voids and the surface fails without warning? You start by listening, not to birds because there are none awake, and not to waves because the Dead Sea does not really do waves. You listen for the difference between a crunch and a cough. A good step is crisp, like snapping thin porcelain. A bad step answers back, low and damp, like the ground swallowed your foot and thought about keeping it. The first escalation arrives without drama, which is how this place likes to hurt you. Your trekking pole taps a plate that looks solid in your headlamp, and the sound comes back empty. You stop mid-stride, boot hovering, because your body understands the word hollow faster than your mind does. You shift your weight backward, slow, and the plate you almost trusted flexes, then settles with a soft crack. It does not collapse, not yet, but it tells you the truth. This shoreline is not a line. It is a lid over a problem. You adjust your route closer to the brine, where the surface has at least admitted it is wet. The water beside you is steel blue in the dark, and somehow brighter than the sky. It reflects your headlamp like a broken mirror. A thin rim of salt snow outlines every small ripple, as if the sea is constantly frosting over and then giving up. You take out your notebook, the pages already curled from dryness, and you write the time in a stiff hand. Before dawn, western shore near Einbokek, transect start point just south of the resort lights. You are not here for poetry, even if the landscape insists on it. You are here because sinkholes have been multiplying along this retreating shoreline like a rash. The team wants fresh edges marked by late morning. The seep is your waypoint, your water plan, and your moving target. You take a few steps, then pause again because the crust changes texture underfoot. The plates become a mosaic, larger pieces fitted together like broken dinnerware. Between them, seams of damp mud glisten, and your headlamp catches a faint sparkle of new crystals. Salt is growing right now in the dark on the edges of your footprints. Congratulations, you are leaving evidence in a place that eats maps. A little inland, the ground rises by the thickness of a book. That is enough elevation here to be a different world. It looks safer, drier, a pale terrace like a sidewalk. But you do not go there. You have watched terraces betray people because the void does not care what looks high. So you follow the waterline where failure is at least obvious. The air is cold for the desert, a pre-dawn coolness that feels borrowed. It will be repossessed by mid-morning. With interest, your breath does not fog much. because humidity here is stingy. Even the air seems concentrated, like it has been boiled down. You pass a shallow puddle of brine that has been isolated from the sea, trapped in a depression. Its surface is motionless, and a skin of salt has formed over it, thin as paper. Your pole touches the edge, and the skin breaks with a quiet sigh. Underneath, the brine is darker, almost oily, and it pulls at the crust like it wants to close the wound. You step around it, because falling into that would not be dramatic. It would be slow, burning, and stupid. A faint smell rides the air, mineral and bitter, like wet stone left in a hot car. You taste it in the back of your throat. That metallic flavor is not your imagination. It is salt aerosols and dust, and the small truth that your body is already drying. You check your pack straps because salt makes everything stiff and abrasive. Zippers snag, fabric turns crunchy, even your patience gets brittle. Ahead, your headlamp catches a line of ridges running parallel to the water. They look like miniature dunes, but they are made of salt, pushed and reshaped by small shifts in water level. Not tides, because there is no tide to speak of, just the sea retreating, then leaving behind another pale band of itself. You step over the first ridge, and your boot slips slightly on crystals. The crust is slick in places, like someone scattered coarse sugar on glass. You widen your stance, and you feel the weight of your pack tug your center of gravity toward the brine. So you slow down more. You have time, you tell yourself, but you also know you are spending it. A faint glow begins to lift the horizon behind the Moab Mountains to the east. The peaks are still black shapes, but their edges sharpen, and the basin becomes readable. The Dead Sea lies long and quiet, a dark slab of water with a bright skin. In the distance, resort lights blink, steady and indifferent, as if the ground beneath them is permanent. It is not. You walk for another few minutes, counting your steps in groups because routine keeps you from imagining the worst. Then you hear it, a soft, wet gulp. Not loud, not sudden, just the sound of something giving up. You freeze, headlamp sweeping. A few meters inland, a patch of mud has slumped inward, forming a shallow bowl. The edges are fresh, darker, and the center shines with new brine. It is small, maybe the width of a kitchen table, but it is a mouth opening. You watch it for a long breath, expecting motion. Nothing moves now, which is the other trick. Collapse happens, then the landscape pretends it has always been like that. You mark the spot with a quick note and a tiny flag from your pocket, pushed into a crack between plates. You do not get closer to admire it. You have seen enough to know what it implies. Freshwater is finding pathways under this crust, dissolving buried salt layers like sugar in tea. When the roof thins, it fails, and the shoreline steps backward again. This is not erosion with a river you can see. This is invisible chemistry doing demolition work under your feet. You keep moving, because standing still here is a negotiation you cannot win. The light grows. Now you can see the shoreline in more detail, and that makes it worse. In the half-light, you notice faint crescent cracks, shallow depressions, and subtle sags. The surface looks like a mattress someone has slept on for too long, and the springs are failing. You choose each step the way you would choose ice on a lake, avoiding anything too smooth, too dark, too damp. White and dry is safer, usually. usually is not a promise. A little farther on, you find an old post, half buried, with a rusted bolt sticking out. It was probably part of a simple fence, maybe from the 90s, back when this line was considered the shore. Now it sits inland, abandoned by the water like a bone left on a kitchen floor. You run your glove over it and feel salt crust on the metal. Infrastructure here does not age gracefully. It just gets left behind, one retreat at a time. The basin itself is quiet, but you can feel it working. The Dead Sea is endorheic, meaning water flows in and does not flow out. The Jordan River delivers what it can. Wadis deliver what they must after storms, and then the sun takes its share. Evaporation is the exit. Everything dissolved in the water stays behind, minerals accumulating like unpaid bills. That is why the sea is so dense, so bitter, so uninterested in life. That is also why the shore is crust, not sand. Sand can be moved and forgiven. Salt keeps records. Your boots keep collecting those records too. The white armor thickens around the soles and laces. It makes each step feel slightly heavier, as if you are slowly being issued weights you did not ask for. You stop to scrape at the buildup with your pole tip. Crystals fall off in small clumps, and you hear them tink against other plates like tiny glass. The sound is delicate, and the risk is not. You look ahead toward where your seep should be based on the last coordinates. It is not visible yet because the terrain undulates in low terraces, but you know the direction. In your mind, it is a simple line, a transect you can walk and measure. On the ground, it is a chessboard of safe and unsafe squares, and the rules keep changing. The first clear decision point comes as the sky turns from gray to pale blue. The waterline bends inward around a shallow bay of mud. Staying close to the brine means skirting that bay, stepping onto a narrow strip of crust that looks thin. Going inland means crossing a broader terrace that looks stable, but you already heard hollow sounds there. You stop and plant your pole, leaning your weight on it while you decide. You test the inland terrace first. Tap, listen. The sound is mixed. Some spots answer crisp, others answer dull. You test the near water strip. Tap, listen. It answers crisp, but the crust is wet, and your boot slips again. Neither option is clean. So you choose the third option, the compromise that keeps you alive. You angle between them, using the edge of a salt ridge as a spine, higher than the mud and not as hollow as the terrace. It forces you to walk a longer arc, but the ground feels more honest underfoot. Honest is all you get here. As the sun crests the mountains, the light hits the salt flats hard. The world brightens too fast, like someone turned on a floodlight in a dark room. The glare off the crust makes you squint, and you lower your headlamp because it is useless now. Your shadow stretches across the plates, distorted by uneven surfaces. You notice how the brine itself changes color with the angle, from dark steel to pale mercury. It looks like it could be cool. It is not. The basin begins to warm in a way you can feel on your cheeks first. The air is still. Then, a small breeze slides down from the east, dry and dusty, carrying the smell of stone. It pushes warmth into the lowland like a lid pressing down. You glance back toward the resort strip. The buildings sit at the edge of the basin, pale blocks against pale cliffs. They look close, but distance here is deceptive because every detour costs you time. You drink a small sip from your bottle, not because you are thirsty, but because you are budgeting. The water tastes faintly of plastic and warmth. You swallow and feel your throat scrape, already irritated by salt air. You keep walking, and the terrain begins to tell you something new. A line of dead tamarisk shrubs appears inland, a thin brown band of branches and dust. They stand like a warning, brittle silhouettes against the pale ground. This, you realize, is last year's shoreline marker. Vegetation that tried to live at the water's edge and then watched the edge run away. The shrubs are not just dead. They are stranded, and they form a rough boundary where the ground changes from salt crust to softer sediment. You had planned to use that line as a reference point for firmer footing, but the sea has retreated again, and between you and the shrubs, there is now a fresh terrace. New ground, unmapped, exposed only recently. That is the next escalation, the one that makes your plan feel outdated in real time. You walk toward the shrubs anyway, carefully, because you want to see what the new terrace is made of. Your pole probes ahead, and the surface feels slightly springy in places, not like grass, like a wet sponge under a thin crust. You stop and crouch, pressing the pole tip into a darker patch. It sinks more than it should, and brine wells up around it. Slow and shiny, you pull the pole out, and the hole fills in quietly, as if the ground is trying to hide its softness. You stand again and adjust your route to follow the shrub line at a distance. The shrubs are your do not trust boundary, but the new terrace seaward of them is also not trustworthy. So you walk in the narrow middle, the uncomfortable compromise strip that exists only because both sides are dangerous. Your boots crunch. Then, suddenly, one step does not crunch. It gives. Just a few centimeters, a drop like a missed stare, but enough to spike your heart. You catch yourself with the pole, planting it hard. The surface under your boot fractures in a thin ring, and muddy brine seeps through the cracks. You lift your foot carefully, and the plate comes up slightly with it, stuck by suction. You set your foot back down on a wider patch and breathe out. Your pulse thuds in your ears. You look at the spot you just tested with your body, and you hate how normal it looks. No warning sign, no dramatic hole, just a subtle failure of stiffness. That is how people end up waist deep in brine mud, alone with the sun climbing. You back away from the weak patch and circle around it, widening your path toward the water again. Because as much as you cannot drink the Dead Sea, at least it is what it appears to be. Inland, the land is pretending. A few minutes later, you find the remains of a service marker, a small concrete pad with rebar exposed. It sits at a slight tilt, as if the ground beneath it has settled unevenly. You kneel and touch the concrete. It is cool in the morning, but already drying fast. You imagine this pad poured for a survey point, a fixed reference in a shifting landscape. That is the joke. Nothing here is fixed except the chemistry. You take a bearing, compare it to your map, and feel that mild, tired irritation of fieldwork. The map is a historical document, the moment it is printed. The shoreline you are walking is newer than your notes. You keep moving because the seep is still ahead. and you are already behind the pace you wanted. The sun climbs higher, and the air begins to shimmer faintly near the ground. Heat is waking up. You hear a distant rumble that makes you pause. For a moment, your brain tries to decide if it is a truck on the highway or thunder. Then it resolves into something more mundane. A distant industrial hum from the potash works to the south, barely audible. Even in this quiet, humans are still evaporating water on purpose, speeding up what the sun is already doing. You pass another small collapse. This one older. Its edges are crusted white, and the center is a still pool, greenish with algae that found a niche. A sinkhole can become a tiny ecosystem. Briefly, life is opportunistic like that. You stare at that greenish center, and you do not mistake it for safety. You have seen poison look inviting before. The algae is not a welcome mat. It is a flag that says, minerals are moving here. Somewhere below, freshwater is threading through salt like a slow drill bit, and the surface is only pretending to be finished collapsing. You stand up, and you feel the sun strengthening on the back of your neck. Morning is over, even if the clock disagrees. A thin wind slides down off the Moab side again, dry as paper. It brings dust that tastes like old limestone, and it pushes heat into the basin. You look for the tamarisk line again, that band of dead shrubs inland. It is a ruler drawn by failure. Last year's shoreline turned into a graveyard. You had hoped it would mean firmer sediment, compacted by time. But time here is not consolidation. It is removal. The Dead Sea retreats, the groundwater follows, and the land hollows out behind it. You walk parallel to the shrubs, not toward them, not away. You keep your route in the uneasy middle, where the ground is equally untrustworthy. Your pole stays in front of you like a cautious antenna. Tap, listen, step. Tap, listen, step. Every good tap is a crisp click, and every bad tap is a low, wet shrug. You learn to hate the shrug. Ahead, the terrace becomes layered, like steps that were poured and then abandoned. Each step is a slightly different color, chalky white to gray beige. They are old shorelines, not ancient, just last week and last month. Base level fall in human calendar units. Forget the postcard. This is a construction site run by physics. You find another artifact on the ground, a length of pipe half buried in salt. It is not archaeology, it is maintenance that lost. The pipe is bent as if the ground grabbed it and pulled once. You crouch and touch it, and your glove comes away white. Salt has a way of claiming everything, even the things built to control it. You stand, and your ankles already feel warmer inside your boots. The salt armor is thicker now, and it scrapes when you move. Your laces crunch, your seams grind, and your socks are beginning to feel damp. Not from water, from sweat that cannot decide whether it is liquid or crystal. You take a longer look toward the sea, because at least it is honest. The surface is flat, steel blue with a hard shine like polished metal. The shoreline is rimmed with salt snow, bright enough to hurt. Your eyes water, and then the tears sting, because of course they do. You shift your weight, and your calf complains. A small warning about the day ahead. Your seep is still out there, inland, somewhere near the pale cliffs. It is both your water plan and your collapse generator. Congratulations, your only lifeline is also your main hazard. You move on, and the ground begins to look newly exposed, in a way you can feel. The crust is thinner, with more mud seams and fewer big plates. This is not a stable mosaic anymore. It is a skin. You start seeing small salt towers, stubby crystals that grew upward overnight. They look like someone tried to build a city from sugar cubes. Each one crumbles under your boot with a quiet snap. The sound should be satisfying, but it is too fragile. The land should not break like candy. A little farther, the hollow sounds return, spaced closer together. You stop and press the pole down slowly, listening to the resistance. It holds, then yields a little, like a mattress. Your stomach tightens because you know what that softness means. There is brine-saturated mud under this crust, and it is not bearing weight well. And under that, there may be a void where salt used to be. You stand still and let your mind run the chain of cause and effect. The Dead Sea is dropping year after year because water is taken upstream. The Jordan River arrives smaller than it used to, and so do the wadis. Industry pulls water into evaporation ponds to harvest minerals, and the sun does the rest. The shoreline steps back, and the groundwater gradients shift toward the new edge. Freshwater, even slightly fresh, meets buried salt layers and dissolves them. That creates cavities, and then the roof fails, and the sinkholes appear. All of that is true, and all of it is happening under your boots. You do not need a diagram. You need a safe route. You turn your head toward the shrubs again, and you make a decision. You will use the tamarisk line as a boundary marker, but you will not cross it. You will stay seaward of the shrubs, but not so close to the water that the crust becomes slick. It is a narrow corridor, and it forces you to walk like you are threading a needle. You begin to see why the sinkholes seem to march in lines. They are not random bites. They follow invisible plumbing. Fresh water moves along fractures, old stream channels, and porous layers. It picks the easiest path, like any tired person looking for a shortcut. And then it eats salt along that path, widening it, making it more efficient. So the sinkholes appear in clusters, then alignments, then fields. You are walking over a map you cannot see. You would like to pretend your pole can read it for you. It cannot, but it helps. The sun climbs higher, and the wind falls off for a moment. The basin becomes a bowl with no stirring. Heat sits on your shoulders, and the glare becomes aggressive. You pull your cap lower, and the brim throws a small shade that feels precious. Your lips feel tight, and you lick them, then regret it. Salt on skin is a lesson that repeats itself until you stop arguing. You take another sip of water, smaller than you want. You can feel your body asking for more, and you tell it no, not yet. You still have distance, and you still have hours until the seep. You keep walking, and the ground under your boots changes again. Now the plates are flatter, and the cracks form polygons, hexagons, irregular but patterned, like dried paint on an old wall. Salt polygons, beautiful in the way a bruise can be beautiful. Some polygons are bright and chalky, and they sound good underfoot. Others are darker, damp at the seams, and slightly sunken. Those are the ones you avoid because they are thin roofs. You test one with your pole anyway because curiosity is a bad habit. The pole goes through with less resistance than you want, and brine beads up. You pull it out slowly, and the hole fills behind it, swallowing the evidence. You back away, and you feel your heart rate spike again. It is exhausting, being startled in small doses all morning. In the distance, you can see the resort towers more clearly now. They shimmer in heat haze, vertical mirages. They look like they are only a short walk away. They are not. Between you and them is a field of collapses and glare and soft ground. Humans build straight lines here, and the land answers with circles. A sinkhole does not care about your property boundary. You angle your route slightly, adjusting for the terrain, and the shrubs begin to thin out. The tamarisk skeletons become scattered, then absent. Now there is only open salt flat, and that makes you feel exposed. You miss the shrubs, even though they were a warning. At least they were a reference, a line in a place that hates lines. Without them, every direction looks the same, pale and reflective. You check your compass, then your map, then your horizon. You follow the shape of the cliffs inland, using them like a wall in your mind. You are walking toward the marl and limestone, toward the pale, chalky rise. That is where seeps like to happen, where groundwater meets the surface. You tell yourself you will find the faint green smear of reeds. You tell yourself you will drink and rest and then continue. But the land has not promised you anything. As the morning pushes toward late morning, the shoreline becomes less like a beach and more like a chemical spill. Salt ridges curve and overlap, like someone dragged a rake through wet plaster. In the troughs between ridges, brine pools, and each pool has its own skin. Some skins are white and brittle, some are translucent and thin. You step around them, because the wrong one will break and soak you. And soaking here is not cooling, it is corrosion. You come to a place where the crust is stained orange-brown, a faint rust color, like spilled tea. You kneel and touch the edge with a finger, then pull back. It is iron-rich sediment, carried by runoff long ago, now exposed again. The Dead Sea keeps revealing layers, like a book being unbound page by page. You stand, and you feel a small ache in your lower back. It is not injury, it is the posture of caution. You have been leaning forward for hours, ready to catch yourself. Your body is learning the shoreline's rules, and it resents the curriculum. You take a moment and look behind you. Your footprints are visible, but already softening at the edges. Salt is regrowing in them, brightening the depressions. The land is editing your trail in real time. That is the philosophical joke here. You came to mark changes, to record collapse, but the ground is recording you and then erasing you. You move on because thinking too long makes you thirsty. The heat is now steady, not harsh yet, but insistent. You can feel sweat on your temples, and it does not evaporate cleanly. It turns tacky, then gritty, as salt dust sticks to it. Your shirt collar rubs, and the rub stings. Your skin is becoming a salt pan too. You see something ahead that makes you stop, a faint line in the ground, like a crack that runs for meters. It is not a single break, it is a chain of shallow depressions. Each depression is crescent-shaped with a darker center. This is a sinkhole line, a future collapse corridor. The ground is sagging along an underground void, not yet open enough to swallow. but it is rehearsing. You walk along the line for a few steps, not on it, beside it. You want to see where it goes, because that tells you where the fresh water is moving. The line trends toward your seep coordinates. Of course it does. You take out your notebook again, and you write a quick description. Crescent sags, aligned northwest. New since last survey. You add a small sketch, because words are sometimes too slow. Then you pocket the notebook and keep going, because the sun is climbing faster than your pen. By late morning, you are close enough to the water again that you can see the density bands. At first, you think it is just glare or your eyes tiring, but then you see your shadow fall across the brine, and it distorts strangely. The water near the edge is not uniform. It is layered, like someone poured different syrups into the same glass. You watch a small ripple pass through, and it bends at an invisible boundary. That is the brine's stratification, density differences from temperature and salinity. The Dead Sea is not just salty, it is complicated salty. There are heavier layers and lighter layers, and they slide past each other slowly. It looks calm, and it is, but calm can still be active. The minerals are always moving, always settling, always precipitating. You step closer because your boots feel like they have gained weight again. Salt is caked around the soles, building up like dried cement. You decide to do something that feels logical and is only partly wise. You will rinse the boots at the water's edge. You plant your pole and you test the nearshore crust first. It holds firm enough for a careful step. You step down, then another until the brine reaches your ankles. The water is cooler than the air, and for half a second, it feels like relief. Then it starts to burn. Every micro cut, every cracked bit of skin, every blister you did not know you had lights up. It is not a dramatic pain. It is a stinging chorus. You suck in a breath through your teeth, and the air tastes of salt and dust. You lift one boot slightly, swishing it, trying to dissolve the crust. Salt does not dissolve quickly in this, because this is already loaded. The brine is saturated, like a crowded bus with no room for more passengers. It can hold some, but it resists. You rub the sole with your gloved hand, and the glove stiffens instantly. When you lift your foot out, the boot drips slowly, thickly. The droplets feel heavier than water should. You set the boot back down on crust, and the brine clinging to it begins to dry at once. Crystals form along the seam, bright white, like frost in fast motion. You do the other boot because symmetry is comforting. Then you step back out, and the burn eases to a tightness. Your skin feels like it has been shrink-wrapped. You flex your toes, and it feels like your skin does not quite fit anymore. This is the Dead Sea's trick. It gives buoyancy, it gives lift, it gives that famous floating feeling. But it takes water from you while you touch it. Osmosis, the technical word, which means the brine pulls moisture out of your skin. It is like shaking hands with a vacuum. You glance at your ankles, and you can already see a white rim forming. Salt is crystallizing on you, turning you into part of the shoreline. You step away from the waterline, and you do not linger. The sea looks drinkable in the way glass looks edible. Your mouth is dry, your body is warm, and your brain suggests stupid solutions. You deny it, and you walk inland again. The wind drops completely now, and the basin turns into a heat bowl. Air sits still, and sound feels muffled. Your own footsteps become the loudest thing in the world. You can hear the crunch, the scrape, the small clink of crystals. You can hear your breathing, shallow and careful. Sweat forms under your pack straps, and the straps rub. The sweat does not cool you the way it should. It becomes a sticky film, and then salt dust clings to it, making a paste. Your shirt begins to feel like sandpaper. You adjust the pack slightly, trying to shift pressure points. That helps for a moment, then makes a new sore. Congratulations, you have discovered that comfort is not available here. You start tracking time differently now, not in hours, in mouthfuls, not in kilometers, in shade that does not exist. You look ahead toward the cliffs again because you need that seep, not as a nice waypoint, as a deadline. And you realize something else. The seep is inland, yes, but it is connected to the shore's retreat. As the Dead Sea level falls, the groundwater gradient steepens toward the new base level. Fresh water is pulled seaward like a slow tide under the ground, so the seeps move too, or change, or grow. The thing you are aiming for may not be where it was last time, and the ground between you and it may be more hollow than yesterday. You keep walking anyway, because staying is not safer. The terrain begins to rise slightly, and the salt crust gives way to more marl. I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. The color under your boots shifts from blinding white to a tired beige, like the land is finally showing you its real skin. Marl feels softer than salt, but do not confuse soft with safe. Salt at least breaks honestly. Marl waits until you commit your weight, then decides whether to hold you. You angle toward the pale rise ahead, because the cliffs are a promise of firmer ground. They are not a promise of comfort. The air changes before the land does. It is still hot, but there is a faint coolness hiding in it, like a wet stone kept in shade. You taste something different too, less metallic, more like chalk. That is your first hint you are nearing groundwater, even if you cannot see it yet. You slow down, because this is where sinkholes like to be born. Fresh water does not just appear, it travels. It threads through cracks, it seeps through porous layers, it follows old channels that stopped being rivers before your species learned to count. And when it meets buried salt, it does what freshwater always does around salt. It steals it, it dissolves it, it makes empty space. Your trekking pole becomes less of a hiking tool now and more of a stethoscope. Tap. Listen. The sound is different here, a duller thud, less glassy, more like tapping drywall. Your boot soles do not crunch as much, they scuff. That should feel reassuring. It does not, because scuffing means fine sediment, and fine sediment means water can hide. You pass a shallow depression that looks like nothing, a faint bowl in the marl rimmed with a fringe of salt crystals. You step around it anyway. Congratulations. You are now afraid of bowls. The cliffs ahead are chalky and pale, layered, like stacked laundry left too long in the sun. Some layers are harder limestone, some are softer marl, and the softer ones have eroded into small ledges. If you had time, you could read the layers like a diary. Lake level up, lake level down, dust storm, flood, evaporation. Repeat. The Dead Sea Basin has been filling and shrinking for ages, long before resorts and roads made it feel modern. It is not a stable lake that humans are ruining. It is a restless system that humans are accelerating. You keep that thought small because guilt is heavy and you are already carrying enough. The ground begins to tilt upward, barely. Your calves feel it. The heat feels it too, because the higher you go, the less the basin holds you like a bowl. A faint breeze finds you again, but it is not kindness. It carries dust that sticks to the sweat on your neck. It makes a paste. You wipe at it with your sleeve, and your sleeve feels crunchy, salted stiff. You look down and see your ankles. The salt rim from the brine has dried into white cuffs, like you dressed for the wrong ceremony. You keep walking because standing still is just cooking slower. The first sign of the seep is not water. It is green, a thin smear of life at the base of a pale slope, like someone dragged a paintbrush once and then stopped. Reeds, or something trying to be reeds. Algae, making the most of a wet patch. It is small, but it is loud in this landscape. Green here is a siren. You feel relief rise in your chest, then you push it back down. Relief makes you careless. Careless gets you dropped into a hole. You approach in a wide arc, not straight in. Your eyes scan the ground for crescent cracks, for ring fractures, for subtle sags that look like tired skin. You find two. One is a shallow crescent, darker at the center. The other is a faint circle, incomplete, like the land started drawing a sinkhole and got interrupted. You test around them with the pole. Tap, tap. The ground holds, but the pole sinks a little more than you like. Not a dramatic plunge, just enough to say, this roof is thin. You adjust again, stepping on slightly higher knobs of marl, little islands of firmness. Now the air smells damp, but damp in a mineral way, not a forest damp, more like a cellar with limestone walls. You can hear something too, barely, a quiet trickle, not a stream, but a sound like water is being poured slowly onto grit. You crest a small rise, and there it is, the seep. It is not a clean spring. It is a shallow pool fed by a thin line of wetness coming from the base of the slope. The pool is larger than you expected. Last survey, it was a modest puddle with a green edge. Now it has spread, making a slick fan of mud that glistens in the sun. The water looks clear at first. Then you notice the edges, white crystals, growing like frost around the wet margin. Even fresh water here cannot stay fresh for long. It touches salt, and the chemistry starts negotiating. You keep your distance because the margin is where the ground lies most convincingly. That slick fan is not just mud. It is mud over dissolved voids, saturated and heavy, pressing down on whatever roof remains. You kneel on a drier patch and set your pack down carefully. Your movements are slow and deliberate, the way you move near a sleeping animal. The sleeping animal is the ground. You take out a sample bottle, a small clear container that feels absurdly delicate out here. You unscrew the lid. Your fingers are stiff from dried salt. The plastic cap squeaks. You extend the bottle toward the wet area without leaning your body over it. You use the trekking pole to steady your arm, like a makeshift crane. You dip the bottle into the pool, just enough to fill it halfway. The water is cool. That coolness is the most tempting thing you have felt all day. Your mouth reacts automatically. Your throat tightens, wanting to drink. You do not. You are not here to die of irony. Freshwater seeps near the Dead Sea are often brackish anyway, mineral-loaded, sometimes contaminated by the very salt they dissolve. And even if it were clean, you do not drink unknown seep water without treating it. Congratulations! You have learned self-control the hard way. You cap the bottle and label it with shaking hands. Time, location, notes about the pool size and the new fan shape. Then you pull out the flagged tape. Bright, loud color in a landscape that prefers bleached silence. You stand slowly and you choose your first flag spot, not at the edge of the wet mud, because that edge is moving. You place it farther back on a firmer patch that will still exist tomorrow, or at least you hope it will. You push the flag stake in. The marl resists, then gives. It feels wrong how easily it goes. You pull it out, choose a slightly higher point, and push again. Better, you make a mental note. Even the dry patches are softer than last time. You walk the perimeter in a slow semicircle, placing flags like you are outlining a crime scene, because you are. The crime is freshwater, doing what freshwater does. The victim is the roof of salt beneath you. You plant the second flag, then the third. Each time you probe first, then step, tap, step, tap. You watch the ground as much as you watch your feet. The mud fan has faint ripples, tiny channels where water has flowed and then evaporated, leaving micro-ridges of salt. It is like a fingerprint. It tells you the seep has been active, persistent, perhaps stronger than usual. Maybe more groundwater is being pulled seaward because the Dead Sea level is lower again. Maybe a recent rain in the uplands fed the aquifer. Maybe the plumbing underground shifted when a nearby void collapsed and rerouted flow. This landscape is always rewiring itself. You place the fourth flag closer now because you want the boundary accurate. You shift your weight forward. Carefully, your pole tip presses into the ground. Near the wet edge, it sinks smoothly, too smoothly. You pull it back and the hole fills with watery mud immediately. That is a bad sign. That means saturation. That means the sediment grains are floating in water, not locked together. Your brain offers a simple translation. There is no strength here. You should step back. You do step back, but you also need one more marker. The team needs a clear edge. So you pick a spot that looks marginally firmer, where salt crystals have formed a pale crust over the mud. A thin skin, a liar skin. You tap it. The sound is dull, but not hollow. You decide it will hold for one step. You move your right foot forward. Your boot touches down. For half a second it holds, then the surface gives way in a quiet, sudden drop, like the ground swallowed its breath. Your leg goes down to mid-shin. The mud is cold and thick, and it grips you. Your ankle twists as your foot hits something uneven underneath. Maybe a buried clump of salt, maybe nothing at all. Pain flashes up your calf. Sharp, immediate. Your hands jerk instinctively, and your pack strap slides off your shoulder. The pack tips, then flops into the wet mud with a heavy slap. Brackish water splashes your sleeves. Mud streaks the sample bottle in your hand. You freeze, because moving fast is how you turn a partial collapse into a full collapse. You plant your pole hard into a drier patch behind you. You lean on it. Your trapped leg shifts slightly, and the mud sucks at your boot. It makes a sound like pulling tape off skin. You breathe through your nose. The air smells damp and mineral, and suddenly too close. Your ankle throbs, and you test it with a tiny movement. It hurts. Not a break, you think. A sprain, maybe. Your brain tries to bargain. Maybe it is nothing. You ignore that. Your body does not spike pain for nothing. You look down at the hole you made. It is not a clean hole. It is a collapsing margin, a slumped edge that is now crumbling slowly inward. Grains sliding like wet sand. The ground around your leg is cracking in small lines, radiating out. That is the worst part. The failure is still spreading. This is not one bad step. This is the roof continuing to fail. You shift your weight back onto the pole and you pull your leg upward slowly. The boot comes free with effort. Mud coats it immediately, heavy and slick. Brine mud is not like regular mud. Regular mud is dirt and water. This is dirt, water, and salt, which makes it feel denser, stickier, more determined to stay. You set your muddy boot onto a drier patch, and you do not put full weight on it yet. You test the ankle again. It holds, but it complains loudly. You swallow because frustration is dry. Your pack is half in the seep margin now, soaked on one side, straps smeared, fabric darkened. You step toward it with your good leg leading, keeping weight light. The pole stays planted. You crouch carefully and grab the pack by a strap, not by the main body. You pull. The mud resists. It holds your pack like it wants to keep your gear as a souvenir. You pull again, harder, and the pack slides free with a wet sucking sound. It comes up dripping, mud streaming off the bottom. One pocket zipper is clogged with grit. A side pouch is coated white where salt is already crystallizing. You set it down on a drier patch and unzip the top. Checking fast. Water bottle. Still sealed. Notebook. Damp at the edges but readable. Radio. Dry for now. Food. Still bagged. You exhale slowly because losing gear here is not an inconvenience. It is a countdown. Your ankle pulses. You sit back on your heels for a moment, letting the pain settle into a steady throb. You look at the seep. It keeps trickling, indifferent to your mishap. Fresh water threads out, touches salt, dissolves it, and the ground weakens. That is what you came to document. Now it is documented in your own ligaments. You take the last piece of flagged tape and tie it to your pole handle for a moment, just to keep it from falling into the mud. Then you stand, using the pole to lever yourself up. Your ankle protests immediately. You grit your teeth and your mouth tastes salty again. Like the landscape is laughing. You do not try to finish the perfect perimeter. Perfection is how you get stuck here until the sun turns you into jerky. Instead, you do what fieldwork always becomes in extreme places. You make the best possible decision with the worst possible options. Option 1, retreat the way you came, back across the salt flats and the collapse lines, but now you are slower. Option 2, angle toward higher ground along the base of the cliffs where sediment might be firmer, but the route is longer. Option 3, Attempt the shorter line along the stepped salt terraces toward the resort zone, but those terraces are collapse country. You look at the sun. It has climbed into its early afternoon posture, high and confident. The heat has teeth now. The basin air feels thicker, not humid, just heavy with stillness. Sweat rolls down your spine under the pack, and it does not feel cooling. It feels like a tax. You look at your water supply. You have some, not enough to waste on a long detour if the heat spikes. You look back toward the seep margin. The ground there is still slumping slightly, slow motion, as if the land is finishing the action that started when you stepped wrong. Staying near this seep is not safe. It is actively erasing itself, so you choose movement over caution. Not reckless movement, just forward. You tighten your bootlaces slightly, trying to stabilize the ankle. The motion makes you wince. Then you adjust your pack to sit higher, distributing weight away from the injured leg as much as you can. You take one careful step, then another. Your walking rhythm changes immediately. Pull forward, test, good foot, injured foot, lighter, shorter stride. Repeat. The terrain between you and the salt flats is a transitional zone now. Patches of marl, patches of salt crust, patches of gritty gypsum. It is like walking across a badly repaired floor, where every tile is a different material. Some patches are firm, some are slick, some crumble. You keep your eyes down because the horizon is a distraction. The horizon promises roads and buildings and safety. The ground offers traps. You work your way down slope again, away from the cliffs, aiming for the stepped terraces that lead toward the visible shimmer of the resort corridor. Your ankle warms with pain. It swells inside the boot, and the boot becomes a pressure band. You loosen the laces slightly again, then regret it, because less support means more wobble. You compromise. Everything today is compromise. The salt terraces begin under your feet like shallow stairs. Each step is an old shoreline, abandoned by the sea. The upper terrace is chalky and dry, with large polygon cracks. The lower terrace is darker, with damp seams. You choose the higher, whiter plates because they tend to be thicker crust. Tend to be. You tap before each step. Tap. Listen. The hollow sound is rare here, but it exists. When you hear it, you reroute, even if it adds distance. Your brain keeps a mental map of safe-sounding spots, but the map resets every 10 meters. The heat sharpens as you descend. It is like walking into a kitchen oven that someone keeps turning up. There is no wind now. The air is still, and your sweat becomes a film. The film catches dust. The dust holds salt. Your skin becomes gritty. Every rub point under your pack straps becomes a slow burn. You take a tiny sip of water, not because it fixes anything, because it gives your throat permission to keep swallowing. You do not want to feel thirsty. Thirst is your body shouting. You want your body whispering. Your lips crack at one corner. You press them together, and the crack stings. Even your face is drying out. You focus on small tasks. Test the ground. Keep your pace steady. Breathe through your nose when you can to avoid drying your mouth faster. And above all, do not fall, because falling here is not just bruises. It is brine in your eyes, salt in your cuts, mud on your clothes, that dries into a stiff crust, and an injured ankle that becomes an injured everything. The polygons underfoot become more defined. They are beautiful in a geometric, sterile way, like a pattern on a lab dish. The cracks between them are dark lines, sometimes filled with dampness. Those cracks can catch your boot. You lift your feet higher than you want to avoid snagging. Lifting hurts your ankle, so you compromise again, lifting just enough. A darker patch appears ahead, slightly sunken, with a sheen. It looks like someone spilled oil and walked away. This is brine-soaked mud under a thin salt roof. You can tell because the surface is smooth, not crystalline. Crystalline surfaces scatter light. Smooth surfaces reflect it. This reflects like a mirror. You stop. You test with the pole. The pole presses in and the surface dimples. It does not break, but it yields like a trampoline. That is a no. You detour around it, stepping onto a ridge that rises a few inches higher. The ridge is rough with crystals, and it bites the tread of your boot. Better. At least it is trying to hold you. You keep moving, but the detour costs you time, and time is becoming the enemy in a more mathematical way now. Early afternoon means the sun is not just hot, it is relentless. It is the kind of heat that makes distance feel longer. Because your body spends energy just being alive. You can feel your heart rate climbing even at a slow pace. Your mouth dries faster. Your thoughts become slightly sticky, like they take effort to peel apart. This is how heat exhaustion starts. Not with collapse, with small, stupid decisions. So you refuse the small, stupid decisions. You do not speed up. You do not skip poll tests. You do not take a big drink and then regret it later. You keep the rhythm. Tap, step, breathe. The salt flats ahead brighten, and the glare intensifies. It feels like walking into a white room with a spotlight. Your eyes ache. You squint, and the muscles around your eyes start to tire. You consider putting on sunglasses, then remember, they are in the pack pocket that is now clogged with dried mud. You stop, set the pack down, and work the zipper gently. The zipper resists, gritty with sediment. You pull too hard, and it might break. So you breathe, and you tease it open slowly. Inside, the sunglasses are intact. You put them on. Instant relief. The world becomes less stabbing. Still bright, but survivable. You shoulder the pack again. Your ankle flares. You swear quietly, not for drama, just because your mouth needs to say something that is not salt. You look up and spot the hotel towers again. They are clearer now, a row of pale blocks along the shore. They still shimmer because heat haze is turning the air into a lens. They look like they are floating, which is appropriate since this whole place is floating on dissolved salt. Between you and the towers, you see something else. A raised line, a berm, a service track, a gravel causeway, slightly elevated above the flats. It runs like a thin spine toward the resort zone. You have seen it on maps and in satellite images. It is supposed to be stable. Stable is relative, but a berm is still better than a salt roof. Reaching it becomes your immediate goal. Not the road yet. First, the berm. You aim your whole tired body at that raised strip of gravel like it is a dock in an ocean of salt. It is not a dock. It is a man-made sentence, and the Dead Sea has been editing it. The berm looks close enough to touch, but the last stretch is a low zone. Low zones here are where confidence goes to evaporate. The ground dips into a shallow basin, darker than the terraces around it. That darkness is not shade. It is moisture held just below a thin crust, waiting for weight. You stop and let your breathing slow, because panic burns water. You plant the pole and test the first few steps. Tap, crisp, tap, crisp again. The crust is firm enough to pretend. You take a careful step, then another, keeping your injured ankle light. Your boot prints leave shallow impressions, and the edges immediately brighten with salt. The land is already sealing behind you, like a wound scabbing in fast motion. Halfway across the dip, the sound changes. Your pole taps, and the reply comes back dull, like a wet book dropped on a table. You angle slightly left, searching for wider plates, higher micro-ridges. The detour adds only a few steps, but each extra step is a small tax on your ankle. You feel the swelling pressing against the boot tongue. Every pulse is the ankle reminding you it has opinions. A faint breeze returns, not cool, just moving. It carries a dry rasp of dust and salt. You blink, and a grit catches at your lashes. Your eyes water again, and the tears sting. Because this place has brand consistency. You keep your gaze low, but you cannot resist checking the berm. It is closer now, and you can see it is not smooth. There are fractures in it, breaks where the gravel line slumps. Even from here, you can tell the edges are not straight anymore. They have scalloped bites, like a cookie someone kept sampling. Congratulations, the safe path is also being eaten. You finish the last meters across the low zone with a slow rhythm. Pole first. Good foot, bad foot, placed carefully, toes slightly outward to protect the sprain. When you reach the foot of the berm, you pause. The berm rises only as high as your shin, but it feels like a wall. It is compacted gravel and fill, dumped here to make a service track. You step up onto it, and the change is immediate. The surface does not flex, it does not sigh, it does not pretend. It just holds you, solid and blunt, like asphalt before it learns humility. You stand there for a long moment, letting the relief settle. Then you look ahead along the berm, and your relief has to share space with reality. The track is fractured in several places, not hairline cracks, gaps, short segments where the berm has slumped toward the flats, spilling gravel downslope. It looks like someone poured a line of stones and then pulled the tablecloth. You walk a few steps forward, carefully, and you see the first real break. A section of the berm has dropped into a shallow depression, the gravel pouring into a round sink. The hole is not dramatic, no vertical shaft, just a circular bowl where the surface is lowered and kept lowering. Quietly, the gravel has flowed into it. Like time made visible, you kneel at the edge, keeping your weight back. The hole smells faintly damp, mineral, like the seep but older. You can see a darker center, moist mud beneath the gravel. This is what freshwater does when it finds salt underground. It makes a void. Then the roof sags. Then your engineered straight line becomes a suggestion. You stand again using the pole as leverage, and you scan for a way over. the gap is too wide to step comfortably, not with your ankle. But it is not endless. To the right, closer to the flats, the berm edge has slumped less. A narrow tongue of intact gravel still bridges the depression. It is thin. It is ugly. It is your best option. You place the pole across the narrowest part, not to hold weight, just to give your brain a rail. Then you step onto the tongue of gravel. The stones shift slightly under your boot, rolling like marbles. You tighten your core, balancing, keeping the injured foot from twisting. One more step, and you are across the break. You exhale like you have been holding your breath since dawn. You keep moving along the berm because stopping invites mistakes. The berm buys you speed, but it demands attention. In some places, it is firm and compacted. In others, it is loose, where settlement has broken the surface crust. You feel the difference through your soles, even through salt armor. The salt on your boots has become a second outsole. It cracks and sheds in little white chips as you walk. They ping off the gravel like tiny beads. You hear a distant vehicle now, not close, but real, a low hum from the road near the resorts. It makes your body imagine cold water and shade. Your body is a liar when it is tired. You pass a broken segment where the berm has cracked lengthwise. A fissure runs along the track, a split that opens and closes slightly as you step near it. You stay on the higher side, away from the downslope edge. The downslope edge is where gravity and dissolution agree on a plan. A gust of breeze hits your face, and it is full of salt aerosol. It dries your lips instantly. You lick them once, then stop, because you do not need that lesson twice. Your throat tightens, and your next breath feels scratchy. The Dead Sea does not just salt the ground. It salts your breathing. It salts your blinking. It salts your patience. You reach for the radio on your shoulder strap because you need to turn your movement into information. This is still fieldwork, even if it feels like limping away from a bad decision. You press the transmit button. Static answers immediately. A harsh whisper. You give your position as clearly as you can, referencing the berm and the nearest visible resort tower. Your voice sounds dry in your own ears. You add a short note about the seep expansion and the collapse margin. You do not mention the ankle yet, because you do not want a rescue in this heat unless you have to. The radio replies with more static and a faint acknowledgement, half swallowed. Communication here is like everything else. It works, but not reliably, and never for free. You clip the radio back and keep moving. A few hundred meters ahead, the berm dips again. Not a full break, just a sag. The gravel surface tilts slightly, and you can see where runoff has carved a shallow groove. That groove is recent because the edges are still sharp. Rare rain falls hard here, and when it falls, it behaves like it is angry. Water that almost never gets to exist arrives all at once. It runs over salt crust, picks up minerals, and cuts channels like a knife in soft butter. The irony is thick. Freshwater is rare, but it is also the main sculptor of destruction here. You test the sag with the pole. The sound is fine, not hollow, just loose gravel. You step through it, and the stones shift again. Your ankle flares, and you hiss a breath through your teeth. Pain is not just sensation now. It is guidance. It tells you how much longer you can keep doing this. You adjust your pace to match what the ankle allows. slower than you want, faster than is safe to stop. In the flats beside the berm, you notice something that makes you pause. A new circular shadow has appeared in the salt crust. It is subtle, a dark disk, maybe the size of a small room. It was not there when you started watching the flats earlier. You stare at it, waiting for movement. At first, it looks like nothing is happening. Then the edge settles by a fraction, almost imperceptible. The crust lowers like a tired eyelid. No splash, no crack, just settling. A sinkhole opening with no drama, as if the land is trying not to disturb you. You take a step back on the berm. Instinctively, you are not even on the salt crust, and still your body reacts. Because the lesson is not about where you stand, it is about how quickly the rules change. You pull out your notebook with stiff fingers. You note the time. You sketch the approximate location relative to the berm. Your handwriting has gotten worse in the heat, the letters slightly shaky. Your notes are a snapshot in a time lapse. Tomorrow, that shadow may be a hole. Next month, it may be a fenced hazard with a warning sign that will also become outdated. You look forward again toward the pale ribbon of pavement. Now you can actually see it. A thin line, gray against the beige and white. It is not close, but it is real. The berm leads toward it like an arrow. This is the part where optimism tries to become a problem, because seeing the road makes you want to rush. You do not rush. Rushing is how you miss a crack in the berm and end up adding a second injury. You keep the same rhythm, but you allow yourself one small mercy. A slightly longer sip of water. You tilt the bottle and the water is warm, almost the same temperature as your mouth. It does not refresh. It simply keeps you functional. You swallow and you can feel the salt dryness fighting it immediately. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth for a second. You close the bottle and put it back carefully, like it is medical equipment. The breeze strengthens for a moment. It moves across the flats and lifts a faint haze of salt dust. The air becomes milky, not thick, just textured. Sunlight scatters through it, and the whole basin looks slightly unreal, like a scene from a film set built to suggest desolation. But your ankle pain is not cinematic, and neither is dehydration. You reach another fractured segment of berm. This one is worse. A chunk has broken away entirely, leaving a jagged edge and a gap where you can see down into gravel and darker sediment. It is not a clean sinkhole yet. It is a wound in the track. You approach slowly and crouch at the edge. The gap is about the length of your leg, too far to step safely. You look left and right for a narrower section. To the left, the berm is higher but the crack widens. To the right, it narrows, but the right side is closer to the flats, where settlement pulls at the edge. You choose the right side because you need a shorter crossing, even if it feels less dignified. You use the pole to probe the landing zone. Tap. Crisp gravel. You pull a breath in and step across, committing your weight quickly but not violently. Your good foot lands solid. Your injured foot follows and wobbles slightly, then stabilizes. Your ankle sends up a hot spike of pain. It fades into the steady throb again. You keep going. The berm has done what it promised, imperfectly. It has kept you above the worst of the dissolving flats. But it has not saved you from the climate in this bowl. The sun leans in. The heat feels closer, as if you can hear it. You start to notice the small signs of your body changing state. Your sweat is less, not because you are cooler, because you are running out of spare water to lose. Your skin feels tight under the salt film. Your shoulders ache under the pack straps. Your thoughts narrow to immediate tasks. This is not sleepiness. This is the brain conserving. Congratulations! You are becoming efficient in the worst way. The resorts look nearer now, and you can see details. Balconies, windows, white walls reflecting sun. They look like ships. You imagine briefly air conditioning and ice. Then you remember you still have to cross the last stretch to pavement. And pavement here is not just a surface. It is a boundary between two philosophies, engineered certainty and geologic indifference. The berm begins to blend into a wider gravel shoulder as it approaches the road. You can see where maintenance crews have dumped fresh fill, trying to keep the track level. Fresh fill is lighter in color. It has not yet been stained by salt dust. It has not yet been undermined by dissolution. Not yet is doing a lot of work in that sentence. You pass a small stack of concrete blocks, abandoned, likely intended for barrier work. One block has a white line around its base. Salt creep, like a tide mark. The sea may have retreated, but salt still travels. Wind moves it, spray moves it, capillary action moves it upward through pores. Salt is patient. It climbs, it expands, it breaks things from the inside. That is why old concrete here flakes like pastry. That is why rebar rusts faster. That is why even the road will one day need repairs for reasons that look like weather, but are actually chemistry. You reach the first true shoulder of pavement. The asphalt is dark and shimmering with heat. Like it is soft. It is solid, but it radiates warmth like a stove. You step onto it and feel a different kind of glare. Less white, more black mirror. Your boots stick slightly, the salt on the soles reacting with the hot surface. You walk a few steps farther from the edge, then stop. Now that you are on pavement, your body finally allows itself to feel tired. Your ankle throbs harder. Your calf is tight from compensating. Your shoulders slump. You lower your pack to the ground with a careful motion. The pack lands with a dull thud on the asphalt. The sound feels strange after hours of crunching salt. You sit down on the road, shoulder, legs out, and the heat from the asphalt rises into you. It is not comfortable, but it is stable. You take off your sunglasses and wipe the lenses with a corner of your shirt. The shirt leaves streaks of salt. Everything you own is salted now. You look back out over the flats. From here, the sinkhole fields are easier to see, not as individual holes, but as a texture, a pocked, uneven surface that spreads like a rash. You notice fresh fencing near the resort area, bright metal posts and warning tape. Some of it looks new because the plastic still has color. And yet, the sinkhole field is creeping sideways toward it, not in a dramatic rush, in steady retreat mathematics. The shoreline is moving and the hazards move with it. And signs are always late. You take a small ration of water and pour it carefully over your hands, just enough to rinse the brine mud off your fingers. The water darkens with grit immediately, then runs down to the asphalt and evaporates. You rub your hands together and your skin squeaks slightly. Salt still embedded. You do not waste more. You pull out a wrap from your kit and loosen your boot. The boot resists, stiff with salt. You ease it off slowly, and the smell that escapes is hot fabric and mineral crust. Your sock is stained with mud on one side, and the salt has stiffened it. You peel it back carefully, and your ankle is already swelling, a pale bulge under dusty skin with a faint reddish tinge. You press gently around it, testing. It hurts, but not the sharp, bone-deep kind. Sprain. You think again. A stupid souvenir. You wrap the ankle snugly, not too tight, because circulation matters and you are not in a clinic. Then you put the sock back and ease the boot on again, looser than before. Your support is now the wrap and the pull, and the promise that you will not do this again tomorrow. You sit there for a few minutes and do the other kind of field work, the quiet logging. You open the notebook to a clean page and start writing. Seep larger than last survey. Fan-shaped mud margin expanding. Fresh collapse line trending toward seep coordinates. Berm fractured in multiple segments. New sinkhole opening observed beside track. Timestamps for each observation. As precise as you can manage. You write about the hollow sounds earlier. You write about the crescent sags. You write about the way the ground near the seep behaved like a sponge. You do not write about fear. Fear is implied by the handwriting. You pause, pen hovering, then you add a note about your own fall. Not for sympathy, for data. If the margin collapsed under a single careful step, it means the roof thickness there is minimal. It means the seep is actively undermining that zone right now. It means tomorrow's perimeter will be different and tomorrow's risk higher. You cap the pen and sit back. The sun is lowering slightly now. Not yet evening, but moving toward it. The heat is still brutal, but its angle changes the glare. The salt flats become less blinding and more reflective. Long shadows start to appear, and the holes in the ground show themselves as darker pits. You can finally see the landscape's relief better, and it is unsettling. Because the sinkholes are not isolated accidents. They form belts. They form corridors. They outline where freshwater is moving underground, like veins. This is what it looks like when base level drops faster than the land can adjust. Gently, the dead sea level falls, and everything else scrambles to follow. Groundwater gradients steepen, pulling flow seaward. Fresh water meets salt deposits that formed when the basin was higher, when ancient lakes left thick evaporite layers. Evaporite is the technical word, which is human, for layers of minerals left behind. When water vanished, those layers were stable as long as they stayed buried and dry. Now they are being reintroduced to water, and water always wins, eventually. The dissolution creates cavities. Cavities migrate upward as roofs fail, and sinkholes appear on timescales that embarrass construction budgets. This is why roads get moved. This is why parking lots get fenced off. This is why entire sections of shoreline become no-go zones. Not because of politics, but because of chemistry. You watch a group of tourists far down the beach near the resort area. They are tiny figures against the white shore, moving slowly toward the water. Even from here, you can tell they are doing the classic thing, testing buoyancy, taking photos, laughing at how weird it feels to float. From where you sit, their bodies look relaxed, like they have entered a spa instead of a sinkhole field. But you know what their skin will feel like in 5 minutes. Tight and squeaky, like drying paint. You know what their eyes will do if a splash reaches them, sting hard enough to make pride irrelevant. And you know the shoreline behind them is not a background. It is a moving hazard line. You watch one person wade in, arms out for balance, then hesitate. You can almost feel the brine grab their ankles, the way it grabbed yours, only gentler at first. They lean back, and the water lifts them with humiliating ease. Congratulations, you are floating in a liquid that is also trying to turn you into jerky. You look away because staring at them is a trap. If you watch long enough, you start thinking in comforts. Comforts make you forget that the ground is still dissolving, even under this asphalt shoulder. The road feels solid because it is young, not because it is safe. Asphalt is just confidence poured hot onto an argument with geology. You shift your weight on the shoulder, and the heat stored in the road presses up into your legs. It is like sitting on a warm stone that will not stop warming. You loosen your collar because salt has stiffened the fabric, and it scratches your neck. When you swallow, your throat feels sanded. The breeze that comes off the water is not cooling you, it is drying you. It carries microscopic salt that lands on your eyelashes and turns blinking into friction. You take out your water bottle again and hold it for a second. Not drinking yet. You listen to your own breathing, making sure it stays calm. Heat sickness does not arrive with a siren. It arrives with a little dizziness you try to ignore. So you do not ignore it. You take a small sip, let it sit in your mouth for a moment, then swallow slowly. You can almost feel your body distributing it, like a budget line being updated. Then you screw the cap back on, because you do not trust yourself with an open bottle. The asphalt beside you shimmers, and for a moment, it looks wet. It is not wet. It is just heat turning air into a mirage, making even the road lie a little. A car passes in the distance, tires whispering on pavement, windows closed. It feels strange how quiet it is, even with people and buildings nearby. The basin absorbs sound in a certain way, like the landscape is padded with salt. You glance at the fresh fencing again, and the warning signs attached to it. They use the kind of language humans love. Simple words in bright colors. Danger. Keep out. Unstable ground. But the signs are already behind the times. You can see the sinkhole texture creeping toward them, like mold spreading under paint. The hazard does not care about your message boards. You stand up slowly, using the pole, testing the ankle. It holds, but the wrap makes it feel thick and stiff, like it belongs to someone else. You swing the pack up onto your shoulder again, because you cannot sit here forever. Not because you are eager, because you know what late afternoon becomes in the desert, a false gentleness before cold arrives fast, and you still have to get to a safer pickup point. Not right here at the edge. You start limping along the road's shoulder, keeping a respectful distance from traffic. The resort zone is ahead, and with it, a different kind of unreality. Palm trees planted in imported soil, lawns that pretend water is common, people walking in sandals over a landscape that eats roads. You pass a drain channel beside the road, concrete lined, meant to carry rare stormwater away. It is dry now, dusted with salt, but you can see the scouring marks from the last flood. The channel is a reminder that water has multiple personalities here. The Dead Sea is slow evaporation, patient concentration. The wadis are sudden violence, short-lived rivers with no warning. and both of them carve the map, one by dissolving, one by ripping. Your ankle twinges as you step off the hottest patch of asphalt onto slightly cooler gravel. You pause in the thin shade cast by a signpost, a pathetic ribbon of darkness. Shade this narrow feels like an insult, but you take it anyway. You check your phone for signal out of habit. Then remember the habit is useless here. Signal comes and goes in the basin, bouncing off cliffs, dying in low spots. The land even interferes with your ability to complain. You lean on the pole and look back out across the flats again, now that the sun angle is lower. The salt crust is no longer a blinding sheet. It has depth. You can see ridges, terraces, and the faint glint of brine in cracks like seams in ice. And you can see how the shore has stepped back, leaving behind those terraces like shed skin. This is base level fall in slow motion you can watch in a single career. Base level is just the lowest point water tries to reach, the level rivers and groundwater aim toward. When that level drops, everything else adjusts. Reluctantly, groundwater starts flowing toward the new low, like a drained bathtub pulling water toward the plug. That pull drags fresh water through salt-rich sediments that were never meant to be flushed again. And every time fresh water touches halite, it dissolves it, turning solid mineral into absence. Absence is a shape the ground cannot support, so the roofs fail, and the surface drops, and the shoreline breaks into circles. You limp onward, passing a cluster of parked buses and a small group gathering near a viewpoint. You keep your expression neutral because you do not want questions. Explaining sinkhole mechanics to vacationers in swimwear is a special kind of futility. They want the famous float, the mineral mud mask, the photograph that proves they were here. They do not want the part where a hotel parking lot gets fenced off and then re-fenced and then abandoned. They do not want to hear that the shoreline is retreating fast enough to strand docks in air. They especially do not want to hear that the Dead Sea is not dying in a gentle way. It is being consumed by arithmetic, less inflow, more evaporation, more diversion, more exposed salt surface, more reflection of sunlight, more heat, more evaporation again. A feedback loop that does not care if you booked a room. You reach a low concrete barrier and sit for a moment because the ankle insists. The barrier is warm, but not as hot as asphalt. You take out the sample bottle you filled at the seep. Mud streaks have dried on it, leaving brown lines like tiny rivers. You hold it up to the light. The water inside is faintly cloudy, not clean, not terrible, just honest. It carries the story of where it has been, through limestone, through marl, past salt deposits. Water is a messenger. Here, the message is that the underground is busy. You put the bottle away carefully because tomorrow someone will run ions and conductivity and try to translate it into numbers. But you already have the translation in your ankle. Fresh water is moving in places it did not before. The landscape is replumbing itself. You shift your boots slightly and feel a crunch inside. Salt crystals have formed in the mud caked on the leather. Every movement grinds them, like wearing sandpaper socks. You briefly consider pouring more water over the boot, then reject it. You do not waste drinking water on footwear. You have learned that lesson from deserts that do not forgive sentiment. A vehicle turns into the access road nearby, and the sound of gravel under tires makes you look up. You lift your radio again and try one more time. Voice low and steady. You give a clearer location now, near the resort access, on the main road, shoulder. Static answers, then a voice, faint but understandable. They tell you a pickup can come within the hour. They tell you to stay put. Avoid walking onto the flats again. You almost laugh at the second part, because yes, you have noticed. You acknowledge, clip the radio back, and let your shoulders sag. Not relief, exactly. Just the knowledge that you will not have to make more route decisions on an injured ankle. While you wait, you watch the light change. Late afternoon in this basin is not golden and gentle. It is sharp, like the sun is lowering but refusing to soften. The cliffs on the far side turn a deeper brown, shadows collecting in their folds. The water darkens to a heavier blue, losing its metallic shine, and the salt crust begins to look less like snow, more like bone. A couple walks along the fenced edge, reading signs, then stepping around them anyway. They take a selfie with the water behind them, careful to keep the hazard tape out of frame. You understand the impulse. Humans hate admitting the ground is temporary. We build stories about permanence because impermanence makes sleep difficult. The Dead Sea does not care about your sleep. The Dead Sea is a ledger, a record of climates that came and went. Long before resorts, there were higher lakes here, pale shorelines etched into cliffs. The basin filled when the world was cooler and wetter. It shrank when winds shifted and rains moved elsewhere. It has been a breathing system for tens of thousands of years, expanding and contracting. What is different now is the speed and the reason. This drop is not just climate, it is plumbing. Rivers diverted for farms and cities. Canals and pipes stealing flow before it reaches the basin. Evaporation ponds multiplying like mirrored scars, designed to harvest minerals faster than the lake can replace itself. You look south where the industrial works sit, out of sight but not out of mind. They are part of the same story. Potash, bromine, magnesium, all pulled from brine by letting the sun do the concentrating. It is clever in a ruthless way. And it accelerates the retreat, exposing more shoreline, creating more dissolving zones. Industry and atmosphere working as a team, whether they mean to or not. You shift again, and your ankle sends up another reminder. The pain is steadier now, less sharp, more swollen. That is not improvement. That is the body deciding what kind of problem this will be. You loosen the wrap slightly, then tighten it again, testing comfort. Comfort is still not available, but you can aim for manageable. A faint pop echoes from far out on the flats, so quiet you almost imagine it. Then you see a small puff of dust rise, a tan exhale against white crust. Another collapse, somewhere beyond the fences, beyond the tourists, beyond the road. It happens without applause. No one reacts. The basin keeps its secrets, unless you are close enough to be threatened by them. You watch the dust dissipate, and you feel something settle in your chest. Not fear exactly, more like the acceptance that the land is doing its work continuously. You cannot negotiate with it, you can only schedule around it. This is why your notes matter. Not because they will stop the sinkholes, but because they can keep someone from stepping where you stepped. They can keep a maintenance crew from driving a truck onto a roof that will not hold. They can buy time, which is the only currency anyone gets from geology. The pickup vehicle arrives as a small white dot that grows into a truck. It pulls onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the glare. The driver steps out, squints at the flats, then at you, then at your ankle wrap. They do not ask for the story in detail. Out here, you can read the story in posture. You stand carefully, using the pole, and walk to the passenger side. Each step is a negotiation with swelling. The truck interior smells like fabric and old air conditioning. When you sit, the seat feels too soft after salt crust and gravel. The driver offers you a bottle of water, sealed, cool, from a small cooler. You hesitate for a second, then accept, because pride is not hydration. You drink slowly, not gulping, letting your body catch up without revolt. Cool water feels almost shocking, like a different climate entering your mouth. The driver turns the truck around, staying on the pavement, avoiding the edges. As you roll forward, you look out the window at the fencing and signs. They slide past like scenery, and you realize how quickly people can stop seeing hazard when it becomes normal. A sinkhole field becomes just another feature, like a parking lot, until it eats the parking lot. The truck climbs slightly, moving out of the deepest part of the basin's heat pocket. It is a small elevation change, barely anything, but you feel the air shift, less stagnant, a little more breathable. You glance back one last time, and the Dead Sea lies there, heavy and still. From this angle, it looks peaceful, almost polite. That is the final lie it tells everyone. Stillness does not mean stability. Stillness here is just concentration. Water sitting in a bowl while the sun pulls it upward, molecule by molecule. When you think about it too long, evaporation becomes its own kind of horror. Not a sudden event, not a catastrophe you can film with dramatic music. Just a constant theft, a slow removal that leaves salt behind like bones after a meal. The truck slows near a small operations area, a cluster of low buildings and equipment storage. You can see other team vehicles, dust-coated, sun-baked. Someone steps out to meet you, and you recognize the efficient body language of field staff. They look at your ankle, then at your pack, then at your face. They ask for the short version. You give it. Seep expanded. Margin unstable. Berm fractured in 2 new places. Sinkhole opening observed beside track. Ankle sprain at seep edge during flag placement. They nod, already translating your words into tomorrow's plan. They help you out of the truck, and you set your weight carefully using the pole. You hand over the sample bottle and the notebook. Your notes leave your hands, and for a moment, you feel oddly lighter, like you have offloaded part of the day. Then the ankle reminds you that you are still carrying the rest. They guide you to a shaded spot, real shade now, under an awning. The air under it is cooler by a small mercy. A fan hums, pushing air that still tastes faintly of salt, but at least it moves. You sit on a folding chair, and the chair creaks, a normal sound from a normal world. Someone offers you an ice pack. You take it and press it against the swelling through the wrap. Cold bites, then numbs. Your body exhales a little. While they log the sample and your report, You watch the horizon through the gap between buildings. The light is lowering toward evening now, and the basin's colors deepen. The salt flats turn from white glare to pale violet in shadow. The cliffs pick up warm tones, then lose them as the sun drops. The Dead Sea becomes a darker slab, almost black at the far edge. This is the hour when the desert pretends it is gentle. The air cools quickly, but the ground stays warm, radiating stored heat. It is a delayed response, like the landscape cannot help but keep giving what it took. All day. One of the team members points at a map spread on a table, asking you to indicate the new collapse line. You lean forward, tracing with a finger, stopping where the seep should be. You notice how quickly your mental map has changed since morning. The corridor you walked in pre-dawn confidence now feels like a bad idea. The berm you aimed for as a lifeline now looks like a fragile thread. You mark the approximate location of the new sinkhole shadow, the one you watched settle. They draw a circle around it, then another circle around the seep area, then a line connecting them. A corridor of risk, updated in ink that will still be outdated soon. You sit back, and the fan continues to hum. You can hear faint resort noise carried on the wind, distant music, a muffled announcement, the idea of leisure. It feels absurdly close to what you just walked through, like two worlds sharing the same coordinates, but not the same reality. Someone mentions that new warning signs went up last week after a sinkhole took part of a walkway. You nod, because that tracks. The shoreline infrastructure is being outpaced. Maintenance schedules operate in months. The ground operates whenever water finds salt, which is always. The Dead Sea retreat is not dramatic like a tsunami. It is a steady lowering that forces everything else to chase it. Pipelines get extended, docks get moved, roads get rerouted, fences get built, then extended, then abandoned, and each adjustment creates new vulnerabilities because every trench and fill changes drainage. Drainage changes groundwater. Groundwater changes dissolution. Everything connects, even when you pretend it does not. The conversation drifts to tomorrow's work, and you listen without committing. Your ankle will decide how useful you are. For now, you focus on the sensations that mean you are recovering, not worsening. Coolness from the ice pack, less pounding in your pulse, a steadier head, less tightness behind your eyes. You drink more water, still, slowly. Outside the awning, the sky shifts toward dusk. The basin begins to quiet in a deeper way. Tourists leave the shoreline. Buses pull away. The beach that was busy with floating bodies becomes emptier. And with fewer people, you can almost imagine hearing the landscape again. Not the sound of collapse, because collapse is often silent, but the absence, the sense that the ground is not as full as it looks, a hollow future under a crust. You stand carefully, testing your balance, and walk a few steps to the edge of the operations area. From here, you can see a stretch of salt flats beyond the fence line. The light is dim enough now that the crust looks smooth, almost soft, like flour. You know better. You know it is sharp, crystalline, and brittle. You see a shallow depression out there that you did not notice earlier. It might have been there all day, or it might be new formed while you were under the awning with ice on your ankle. That is the unsettling part. You cannot watch everything. The landscape works whether you are looking or not. A faint, cool breeze slides through, coming down off the cliffs. It carries less heat now, but the same dryness. It moves across your face, and you feel your skin tighten again as moisture leaves. Even at dusk, dehydration continues, just quieter. You turn back toward the table and the map because there is still practical work to do. You describe the seep's new fan shape in more detail, the way the margin behaved like a sponge. You mention how the pole sank smoothly and the hole filled immediately. They nod again, writing it down, adding it to a list of indicators. Saturated sediment, thin crust, active dissolution, high-risk perimeter. These are the phrases that will become tomorrow's briefing. But phrases do not capture how it felt when your leg dropped and the ground continued cracking. They do not capture the sound the mud made as it tried to keep your boot. They do not capture the way the landscape pretended nothing happened afterward. Still, you give them what you can, because data is the only defense anyone has here. Night approaches faster than you expect because the basin steals twilight. The sun drops behind the western rim, and the light drains out of the flats. The Dead Sea becomes a dark presence rather than a visible surface. Resort lights begin to glow again, steady rectangles of human certainty. The warning fences are harder to see now. The hazards do not become safer in the dark. They become easier to forget. Someone turns on a floodlight at the operations area, and harsh white illumination spills onto the gravel. It makes the scene look clinical, like a lab, which is appropriate because the Dead Sea shoreline is chemistry made into terrain. You sit